We got a flood of subscribers to our YouTube channel this last week. Thank you so much. We love seeing the show grow and the platform grow and our channel grow. So just want to say thank you for all of you who are taking the time to do that. And if you haven't done that already, well, stop waiting, friend. Subscribe to wherever you're listening to the podcast or watching the podcast. I'm Leah Piper, the Tantra expert at Sex Reimagined, and I am with
Dr. Willow Brown, your Taoist expert. And today we had a very unusual guest. He's not an expert per se in the field. However, he did write a very important and very helpful book on divorce, Take the High Road. So Andy Heller, he was actually a successful businessman, had all kinds of success, wrote a couple of books on real estate that were great, and said, man, I'm never writing another book again because it's an arduous, hard thing to do. But then went through his divorce process, started reading all these books on divorce and realized, okay, actually, I do need to write another book because there's some holes in all of these books that I'm reading and I want to fill the gaps. So he wrote an incredible manual on how to go through divorce and how to take the high road. So you're going to dig this interview if you are thinking about divorce, in the middle of a divorce, already through a divorce, or have a friend going through it.
Yeah, I think this is so good. He really went around, did all this due diligence so you don't have to. He interviewed lawyers and therapists and people who'd gone through it. So to really give people the best practices to have the best outcome so that you feel like you took good care of yourself through the process and you also took good care of your kids and your finances and hopefully can remain generous with your ex and work together instead of working against each other, which is so hard to do in divorce. So it's time to tune in, turn on, and fall in love with Andy.
Heller. All right.
Welcome to the Sex Reimagined podcast, where sex is shame-free and pleasure-forward. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to the show, Andy. So glad to have you.
Thank you, Leah, for having me.
You bet. So we know you've had quite the journey and you've written about this journey in your latest book. Can you share a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to talk about divorce, knowing that you're a businessman and you had other pursuits and probably were surprised to write a book about divorce?
Sure. Well, I'll try and give you my story, Leah, in less than 3 or 4 minutes so we can leave more time for talking about other people. But my story is very interesting. So I am a successful businessman. I had a business running a shipping company. I've taught real estate. I've written 2 real estate books 2 decades ago. I swore, Leah, I would never write another book again because it's very laborious.
It sure is. Oh my God, I can attest. I'm like in the throes of a book proposal right now. It's driving me crazy.
Dr. Willow, I can be your therapist for that one.
Okay, good, Andy. I'm calling you after this podcast.
All right. So, every human being has a different process for managing stress. I had a high conflict divorce of my own, Leah. And 2 things about me is I don't sleep a lot because you got a lot on your mind. And I just write notes. And as an example, when my mom was passing away in hospice, my notes actually became an article that got picked up by 5 newspapers in the Mother's Day after she passed. So I'm going through my own divorce. I'm writing all these notes, whatever. And I'm that guy in a group of friends. Everybody's got a guy like me in a group of friends. I'm very, very compromise oriented. I always try to see both sides. People say, well, Andy, this is what's happening. What do you suggest? What do you suggest? So I consider myself a reasonable thinker. So I'm not ashamed to say that my divorce was kind of high conflict, and our co-parenting counselor suggested that my ex and we each get a therapist. So I've said, okay, give me a couple names of therapists who've done a lot of work with divorced men. So I found this lady. She was amazing. She was my rudder. All right. So something happened with my ex. I'm like about a year into it. And rather than act on it right away, I had this appointment coming up with my therapist. Said, all right, I know what I want to do, but I'm just going to wait. I'm going to bounce it off my therapist. So I go in there and I said, okay, this is what's going on, but don't worry. I've thought it through and here's what I'm going to do. So she immediately went into the therapy speak. Well, Andy, I'm glad you think that way, blah, 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 blah. But you're not going to do what you want to do. You're going to do the opposite. What? And after I stopped saying, but, I shut my mouth and I listened to her. And she went and said, okay, Andy, this is what you're going to do. And this is why you're going to do it. And she was 100% right, Leah. And I was 1,000% wrong.
Wow.
And I left that session with a realization. Here I am. I'm not out to hurt my ex. I consider myself a pretty reasonable guy. I was not conscious of the degree to which I was emotionally compromised and not making good decisions.
Mm.
And I realized in that session, I am not able to navigate this on my own effectively. And then I looked at my notes that I've been writing for a year and a half. I'm like, oh my God, I got the outline for a great book. Now, the only part I left out of my story is, while I'm not sleeping, I'm reading all these other countless divorce books. And they're not, I'm a big believer, even the worst book, if you get one nugget, it's not a waste of time. But these books there's a book about talking to your kids, there's a book about dealing with your ex, there's a book about narcissistic exes, there's a book about sex after marriage. All this stuff. And the fact is that most people don't have as much time as me, and they are going to get more sleep than 3 hours a night, and they need everything in one book. So I went ahead and started a 7-year project of researching, and I used my business background, and I interviewed countless therapists, kids therapists, individual therapists. I interviewed co-parent counselors, divorce attorneys, tons of couples who went through high conflict divorces, thought it would never get better, but yet landed in good places. So what did you do right? What did you do wrong? So my book is actually a one-stop shop best practices manual for how to get through a divorce, including difficult questions like re-entering the dating world, when to tell your kids you have it, somebody new in your life. When is the right time to date and not to date? How to manage co-parenting with somebody you couldn't live with under one roof, now under two roofs, and all these things into one book. And I did not write this book to make money. The facts, Dr. Willow, I'm not going to try to depress you right now, but just
It's not a moneymaker. It's just a labor of love.
Well, it is a total labor of love. 1 out of 100 books make money today, everybody. So I've got a good career. I wrote this book, as corny as it sounds, to help others. I saw a gap in the divorce space that I was uniquely qualified to fill. And, look, it's the feedback I've got from the therapy community, and more important, from people who've read the book, men and women, said, hey, you really helped me, has been rewarding. So that's what brings me to your show today. And I'd love to help as much as I can. Now, one thing I'll say is my book is not about my divorce. Andy Heller is not an expert. What I did was I interviewed field experts and took their counsel, organized it in a best practice manual. In fact, my own divorce is not mentioned anywhere. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it, ladies, and I'd love to talk.
Andy, what's the title of your book?
Take the High Road, Divorce with Compassion for Yourself and Your Family.
Love it.
Love that.
Thank you.
Yeah. What was like the biggest piece of advice that you took that you also see other people taking because it's maybe that surprising or that effective?
I'm going to make it's a really simple one. It does get better, guys. When you're in the thick of a divorce, you think, oh my God, my life is in the toilet. It almost always gets better, everybody. And I'll add a caveat to that. If you're going through divorce, or you got a friend's going through divorce, probably the most powerful thing you can say is divorce is a marathon, not a sprint. And it takes a bit longer to get to the finish line. That finish line could be 2 or even 3 years after you sign your papers. But most people do land in a place that you're healthier and happier. What things like your show and my book, tools like that can do is accelerate that process. All right. But you will land there. The goal, what I'd say, is let's try to get there faster instead of later.
Yeah. So it seems like when people are facing divorce, like the big things on their mind is your heart's broken, or you feel bad that you broke someone else's heart. You're worried about your kids, if you have them, and the money. Anything
And the
else you would add to
house.
the list? It seems like those are the big 3.
The
I would
house, like
couple the house with
unraveling.
money, but yeah, the house could be a
Yeah.
4th.
Well, yeah.
Well, we
Why
had a
am I here?
guest who was like,
Yeah.
sell the house, remember? She was like, get rid of the house right
Start
away.
over, get
Yeah.
a different
Yeah.
house.
Well, speaking about the house, I'd say the right answer is different for every family.
Sure.
Okay. And I can speak to that if you want. You guys covered actually most of them. The only thing that I would add, and this is actually a surprise one, and this actually, again, this book is not about my divorce, but my own experiences did give me hints about some helpful chapters. And in my world, everybody, my ex was she was a super mom, great mom, stay-at-home mom. She just great. She cooked great meals. She got involved in kids' schools and set up the play dates. And I was a classic workaholic guy. Now I was totally involved in my kids' lives, but I was a hard worker. All right. So, I had like one dish that I would cook, had like a great date, and that was it.
Yeah.
So I had to reinvent myself. And so did my ex. She had to go back into the working world. So the one stressor that you didn't mention that I think is so overlooked is the stress around changing roles.
Yeah.
Because you
good.
have to become competent. Because in a typical household of 2, the way it typically works out is one of the adults will say, "This domain is mine. I got the finances. Don't worry about that."
Right.
In another says, "Okay, well, I'm going to cook 6 of the 7 meals a week. You cook the other one, whatever. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this and that." But
Right.
when you go to a 2 household environment, you've got to become competent in things that you're not good at. And in my own world, it was even amplified because when I split up, not only could I not cook, but my kids were on gluten-free diets. No, they had nut allergies and no lactose intolerance. So imagine learning how to cook. I mean, buying snacks for schools was hilarious, guys. There was vanilla flavored rice cakes. There was strawberry flavored rice cakes. There was raspberry flavored rice cakes. And just for some variety, blueberry flavored rice cakes. That was Andy Heller buying snacks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest stressors that is really overlooked is you need to become competent at things that your partner was really good at. You don't have to become great at it. So I set out, like, I didn't want to be mac and cheese dad, but I wanted to cook healthy meals for my kids. And that was so stressful. So I rolled up my sleeves, I got out some cookbooks and I learned. My ex had to go back into the business world and get a job, and she hadn't in years. And I know that was stressful for her.
Yeah.
So each of us had our own areas that really caused tremendous anxiety. And this is, in my opinion, one of the most overlooked stressors when you're splitting up.
Yeah, like stepping into a whole new identity usually commonly at an age when you're like ready to start looking at winding down,
Heck
you're wanting to just head toward retirement and start to kind of bring things back into a more sedated place in your life. And then this big upheaval happens and it's like, oh my God, you're starting from scratch. In a way, I feel like that keeps people young, keeps them healthy and young in a way. I mean, it's stressful. However, renewing yourself and rebuilding yourself from the ground up at any age, whether you're, in your 40s, 50s, 70s, 80s, is going to give you fresh perspective. And I think fresh perspective is really what keeps us young.
But I think it's also hard to get a fresh perspective in the beginning. You're just
Oh,
grappling
at
with the
first
fact
you're like,
everything
I'm
is
trying to
burning down,
survive.
and you feel
Yeah.
screwed, and you don't know how the next day is going to go. I mean, I just remember being one of the older kids watching my parents get a divorce. Like, they were a hot mess. It was a very challenging handful of years, and yeah, it was really sad and hard to watch them just fall apart around themselves, and they were
Yeah.
trying to hide it from us, but I was seeing things they probably didn't know that we were seeing.
That you were seeing.
Yeah, like watching my mom just fall apart in tears and finding out my dad's in the fetal position, calling my mom. It was just like so sad. There was no fresh perspective. There was nothing but doom and pain and guilt and victim.
What about down the line, like after they kind of
It took
got through this
years.
survival?
It took years.
It did.
Yeah,
It
and
can
it was
take a
not
long
easy.
time.
It
Mhm.
took a long, long time. Sometimes
Yeah.
I think there's parts of them that still aren't over it.
Mm.
One of the benefits of today's generation is I think we have a lot more self-awareness. I mean, honestly, a service, I'm calling your show a service, like yours didn't exist for our parents' generation.
Yeah.
So, and they were far more private, which I think has its downsides. So, but today I think you can certainly take conscious steps like reading my book, like coming to your show, like getting a therapist that can really accelerate that process because it is difficult. So,
I think
you
emotionally
know,
too, it's like the shame and the guilt. I mean, I guess the best outlet for that is therapy. And also, like Dr. Willow mentioned, it's seeking a fresh perspective, not knowing that it's hard right now. And maybe you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but you can seek the light. You can seek for a way forward and having somebody help you be in what it is today and feeling that fully, but also cultivate what can you look forward to, seeing that. And I think this thing is for kids. It's like kids want their parents to be happy, even if that means they're happier apart. I know that was true, certainly for a lot of families that I know, and for myself with my parents. Like, I just wanted a happy dad and a happy mom. And if they couldn't be that for each other, I wanted them apart. And I think a lot of people assume that kids just want their parents together no matter what, but really, they want you happy. And if this is the way to get there, then trust me, they want that for you. What are your thoughts on that?
you're not leaving me anything to say. That's a home run. Yeah, that's correct, and that's actually in my book.
Really?
And that is a child in the end just wants their parents to be happy, and very often that is in separate households.
Yeah.
And that's one thing we parents that are going to get divorced can remind ourselves of. Yes, in a perfect world, you have a healthy marriage, and you're raising the kids under the original biological household, but that's
Yeah.
not always possible
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons. And again, I mean, if you look at two different scenarios for raising children, a scenario under one roof, biological parents who are clearly fighting and not happy, versus two different homes where the parents have some level of co-parenting collaboration, but the households are calm and happy. That's much, you're raising these children with higher likelihood of having good relationships themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. So like I've remarried and my children they are older now, but they have, in my household, they have a great example of a warm, loving relationship.
Yeah.
My ex had a partner she was very close to for a number of years who lived together. They also had that in their households. So I think that's important.
Mhm.
And that is certainly almost all the therapists will tell you that if you cannot live happily together, it's better to separate.
Yeah. I think also, what kind of advice would you give? I think one of the things my parents did really well in their divorce is they did not talk bad about each other in front of us. They were really supportive of us being respectful and loving and seeing the best qualities in them. It really wasn't until my 30s that I started to hear like the truth of how they really felt. And by that time, you're a little more stable to hear those things, and you can hopefully you have enough awareness to not take on your parents' bad feelings for each other, and really just stay concentrated on your relationship with that parent and judge them on the basis of that. But, does that have you in your research and talking to people, does that arise? Like, how do you, especially when you have some feelings about your ex-spouse, navigating what you tell the kids and what you expose your kids to regarding your own feelings? How do you manage that well?
Well, I have you touched on which I would call fundamental point of divorce is don't bash your ex.
Yeah.
So that is in most good divorce books. I do have something in my book that is was absolutely blew me away when I learned this. And this came from an interview of a therapist. So I give the same advice, but with a different caveat, Leah, and it's this. The therapist said, children, even as young as 3 and 4, they understand one thing intuitively, that they are the biological product of the DNA of two people, a biological father and a biological mother. So assuming the divorce is a mixed gender, I guess call it a traditional family, and you're splitting up, when one spouse, former spouse, criticizes their former partner, the child processes this as self-criticism. And you run the risk of affecting the child's self-esteem because you're criticizing half of their DNA.
Right.
So this was a way of saying something that's been said for years, don't bash your ex, but in a completely different way of how a child processes it. And to me, it's one of the most powerful things that I realized during my 7 years of research, and that went into the book.
Did you know that while you were in your divorce process, or you learned it later?
Later. I learned that when I was researching my book. But I also, I can't speak to what happened in my ex's household. I don't think I was bashed by her. No, I don't think she did. But I know I didn't. And I was very, very generic. When mom's name came up and the kids were younger, I was very, very careful. My answers were vanilla. And I have a couple chapters in the book that deals with how to answer kids' questions. And when kids bring up things, and even things like, well, hey, guess what? Mom's new boyfriend gave me this great gift. And, the natural instinct is to ask questions. How tall is he? Is he better looking than dad? Stuff like that.
Sure.
But you can't do that.
What's he like? What's he look like? What's he do for a living?
You're gonna want to ask that, but you can't, and you've got to take that conversation, acknowledge the child at whatever age, what they've said, and pivot. So, I got a couple chapters that deal with that, and that's the reality of what happens when you separate. You're going to eventually find new partners get involved.
Sure.
And sometimes the new partners are involved from the start, which does make it more challenging. That is a factor that if there was a third party that had let's call it
play in the
divorce,
a play in the role,
and that person is instantaneously involved, that does complicate the dynamics. And if that's happening in your world, everybody, it's inevitable. Accept it. But I will say to you that it would not be a bad thing to involve a therapist on how to handle that, because if this is a permanent partner you want who's in your life, you want that permanent partner to be accepted by your children. You want to have a comfortable environment, and you probably don't have the skills on navigating that, because that is a complicating factor.
Right.
Absolutely. What's your advice for men who might be ready earlier than their ex to start dating again? Let's say, they've been going to therapy, the divorce is maybe partially halfway through or something, and they're ready, but they know it's going to hurt their ex, but they would like to start anyway. Any sort of communication, still keeping, good amicable relationship going with the ex?
Well, I'm going to answer your question on two parts. The first part is, guys, you're probably not as ready as you think you are. That's the first thing. And there's a chapter in the book called Bromance. Well, actually, my publisher had me change the name, but the original name of the chapter was Bromance and Womance Before Romance. In other words, most likely if you're married, most of your close friends were other married couples.
Yeah.
So put your initial time and effort into establishing yourself a new posse, perhaps other divorced men who've been through it and already landed, other divorced women
That's
Okay.
great advice, guys.
Yeah.
Great
Yeah.
Great
advice.
advice.
The dating will come. All right. And ironically, if you've got yourself a new posse, you're probably going to be going out and meeting some members of the opposite sex.
Sure.
So to the other part of your question is just be very private and be very respectful.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. And,
That's good advice too.
if you are still sharing the same residence, be really, really careful about when you
Yeah.
come home and try to come home. Because you're going to need to co-parent with this person. And even if your partner is okay to end the marriage and she's maybe even the facilitator and wants it more than you, all right, but you are ready to date, it will hurt and it will make observations that are made about dating can have a disproportionate effect on making your co-parenting more difficult.
Yeah.
So take more time than you need. Now, I will say in saying this, Dr. Willow, it is completely natural to be ready and want it and
Yeah.
miss it, because it's not just if you decide to divorce today, okay, it's likely the intimacy ended months, if not years before. So
True.
it's completely reasonable to miss
Be
that.
hungry.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And that's why I say the bromance and womance part, that will help fill some gaps. Add a few months in there.
Mhm.
And you know what? Having a couple guys who went through what you're going through to hang with, that's great. That's going to really make it easier for
Yeah.
you to step back and start socializing.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
that's good advice. I think there's also advice out there that's like, you want to get over someone, get under someone. So, but there's something about sort of creating the gap. It's like widening the gap. And sometimes being intimate with someone helps feel like there's an illusion that it helps get the other person out of your head or out of your heart quicker. And so I can understand why people feel sort of compelled to want to go in that direction. But I think your advice is more sound. Like, focus on friendship. Because honestly, regardless of who you end up
And
being
you can
intimate
still
with,
get under
sexually intimate with,
someone.
yes.
It
Yeah.
doesn't
that
have
way
to be
you're also
another relationship, right?
And
Yeah.
I think friendship is also the key foundation to any good relationship.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if something
And so
really
many
romantic or love, the love bubble or the love kind of gets involved, having that foundation of friendship is just wise, that you
Yeah.
start off that way.
I
And
feel
one
like
of the things I think is really interesting is about male friendship, because a lot of statistics and research shows that men after divorce, they haven't been really fostering a lot of friendship in their life. And women tend to stay friends from like childhood on. We have this weird Velcro to other women, and it's kind of easy and normalized in our culture for women to have female friendships. But men tend to like get married, have kids, then their wife is their best friend, and then they only hang out with couples. And it's kind of some of that male bonding is harder to get to. And in fact, it's at this stage in life with men who get a divorce that suicide rates increase for men. And I think a lot of that has to do with loneliness. And so
Yes.
like men's groups, men finding other men who they can have something in common with so they don't feel so alone. I think that's just really great advice for them to seek out.
Yeah,
And
do
then
you talk
there's the
about
friends
that?
that pick sides in a divorce, right? So you end up
Yeah.
losing a lot of friends.
Do you talk about that in your book? Like how men can go out and find bromances? Like what are some steps? I actually have some
Yeah.
clients right now, and I'm
Yeah.
like,
How
Well-
do
go
you
to the
find
gym.
friends?
How do you find
Yeah.
friends?
Well, I do talk a lot about that. And
Oh,
one of the
good.
things, one of the chapters in the book is about, okay, everybody tells you kids go number one, kids go number one, kids go number one. And they're absolutely right. But if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be as good a parent as you can be. So one of the chapters deals with putting something on your calendar that's new for you to look forward to. So, and it could be also fill one of those needs. So take a cooking class, join a bowling league, softball team. And through these avenues, you may also meet somebody new.
Yeah.
So like in my own world, I went ahead and did my bromance phase. I reconnected with people in the city who were still single. I said, and I called up my friends. And I said, look, I'm splitting up. Uh, I'm not ready for blind dates, but can you introduce me to some guys who've been through this? I need to make some new friends, single guys. And out one night, ladies, I met the first girl that I dated, post-divorce. So that's where I'm saying that you don't necessarily have to go the dating apps.
Right.
You can meet, and let me also say one more quick story about kind of what's out there that shouldn't be out there. So I
Mm.
was separated. I was living separately, and I was waiting for the divorce to be signed. So I was done. All right. And I did join the dating apps. I remember one date. Now I'm running my own business, trying to learn how to parent on my own. So my time was really precious. I go on this one date, and I met this young woman at a coffee shop. She's lovely, very pretty, very engaging, very nice. But she's talking to me and telling me her situation. And it said separated. I was separated. I was definitely separated, waiting to sign. Okay. So she goes on to explain, oh yeah, so yeah, I'm out there now, and we're still in the same house. I'm downstairs, he's upstairs. He really wants to give it another shot, but I'm ready to move on. And I'm like, okay, I gotta go. Now, I
Mm.
wasn't rude,
Yeah.
but what I really want to say is that if you had told me before we agreed to spend the next hour and a half together, driving out to meet you, time in the coffee shop, that you are living in the same residence with your husband who wants to rekindle your romance, I would have said you're not ready.
Yeah.
So men and ladies, you may be finding people in the online community who really are not ready themselves. And that can be really demoralizing. When I left that day, I'm like, oh my God. I mean, I could have used that hour on my business, which I just started a new business. And it was just, I
A
felt almost
time
like
waster.
it was bait and switch. So
Oh,
take your
interesting.
time, everybody. Be selective. The romance will come. And ironically, it might come faster and more healthy if you're not chasing as aggressively.
If you work on taking care of yourself primarily.
Yeah, yeah. And it will come. And you also want to be in a place where you're kind of feeling a bit better. And the other thing that I learned is this: when you get back out there, is, it's one thing you meet somebody in your 20s and it's all about potential and, what is this person from a good family? Do we want the same things in life? But, when you start dating again, late 30s, 40s, 50s, I met a lot of people who I think just didn't have their priorities right. Okay.
Mm.
Some of them just, I'm going to just have I just want to piss off my, all right. And
Oh.
I was kind of healthier. I was done. I was like, I'm ready for that next stage. And I met so, you're going to go into a community that didn't exist when I started dating all these online apps and stuff. It's like going to a grocery store. There's so many choices, and you can, it's almost like, I've got friends of mine where it's like, I think it's a drug. You could spend 2 hours a day on this, everybody.
Yes.
And you've
It can
got
be
to set up
addictive.
you've got to set up some parameters. I got one of the best advice, and this is not in the book, but this is advice I got from a friend of mine. She said, all right, when you meet people online, before you agree to meet them, ask for a phone date for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I did
Oh, for
that.
sure.
And
Yeah.
I did that, and I filtered out half of the
Yeah.
people. So
Totally.
and this will really help you keep your sanity, because nothing is more demoralizing than going on. I mean, I got friends that do 6 or 7 of these dates per week.
Wow. And
And
half of
yeah,
them are not going
right,
anywhere. Yeah.
right. So,
Oh yeah. You got to
um,
screen.
Well, it
you
seems
got
like
to
it's also a
screen.
dopamine hit, right? It's like something to distract you with, something that you
Uh,
get to kind of engage. There's a
You
little
get
bit
a
of
little ooh la
juice.
la. Your
Yeah,
little
yeah, but
dopamine is
it can
going
be
off.
too much of a distraction.
You lose
Um,
your time and energy
yeah.
over it.
Dr. Willow, I wish I hadn't finished my book, because I would have used your technical term, ooh la la in the book. I love that.
What about money?
Oh,
The
there's never
money
enough of it.
issue. Yeah.
Somehow that's true. No
Yeah.
matter
All
how
right.
much you have or
All
how
right.
little you have.
So what I'm going to say, is going to upset some men and some women, those that are given the money, but I'm going to say it anyhow. And if you are the one cutting the check, you want to be as generous as you can be. Why? Well, first of all, it's the right thing to do. Second of all, is if you have kids, I'm assuming you have kids or a child, you want your kids to be comfortable in both homes.
Yeah.
Okay. And you don't want your ex to struggle. All right. And you want to be able to look at it. One thing people don't think about a lot when they get a divorce is you're going to be having conversations with your kids when they're adults. It'd be completely different. And they will quit. And you want to be able to look at them in the eye. I said, times were tough, but I did this for your dad. Times were tough, but I did this for your mom. I did the best that I could at the time. And that's really powerful, everybody. All right. The other thing I'm going to tell you about money that's really interesting. You need to disengage. This came from a very powerful therapist. So it's very common that the one writing the check sees how their former spouse is spending the money and disagrees.
Right.
All right.
See that all the time.
So that's not your job.
Right.
Your job is to write the check and check out. You can have a say if you feel your children are not safe and not being raised comfortably. But if your ex is getting too nice a new car, if the home is nicer than what you think he or she needs, your business, your kids are safe. So the money can be replaced. Your children cannot. So I know that is
Great
not what a lot of
advice.
I
people
love
want to
that.
hear.
Yeah.
Yep. And the other thing I would say, one more piece to that. I know somebody in my world who's going through one right now. And I was just talking actually yesterday to them and the family, and I said they're going to court. I said, if there's an opportunity to settle at court, and it's a bit more than what you want, take it, run with it, and move on.
Yeah.
Because the way you want to look at it, it's like a fence. All right. Over on the other side of the fence is the rest of your life.
Mhm.
All right. And you're on this side of the fence. The faster you can get onto the other side of the fence and start living the rest of your life, finding yourself a new partner, setting up your new home, the better. And if that quick settlement, maybe paying a bit more than what you want to pay, shortens that space and gets you over that fence 4, 5, or 6 months earlier, it's great.
Take it.
Yeah.
Take it. Because
It's worth it.
because I didn't understand.
That's
this
really
with
good
my-
advice. And that's good advice for anyone who's like, oh my God, I'm standing at the edge of the fence. I got to get to the other side. Like the sooner you can get to it, the better, regardless of divorce being in the picture.
I think too, when you can lead with generosity, it just feels better in your soul when you long term. It may feel bitter in the short term, especially if you feel like your spouse doesn't deserve it. And here you've worked so hard and you're giving away 50% of your life. And if it's the second or the third time you've done that, ouch.
That's hard.
That is hard.
Oh,
Yeah. Do you
that's
talk
hard.
about multiple divorces in your book?
Yeah.
No, it's just it's really a platform that how to do it the right way. And the right way. The way I look at it, it doesn't matter if it's your second divorce. You still want to do
Yeah.
it the right way.
Yeah.
So it's
And I think we should say something about the mindset of the one who's also getting that generosity. And to
that-
be able to
Yeah.
be in the receivership of that, if you can, regardless of your hurt or your bitterness or anger at the time, notice that, take that in, acknowledge it. If you have it in your heart to validate it, to acknowledge your partner and say, thanks, you could have made this harder. And I appreciate you doing the right thing for us.
I wish
For
I could
me.
take your advice, record it, and put an audio chip into my book and have people hear that. Because the sad reality, Leah, is at that time, it almost never will happen.
Right.
Unfortunately, people say, like, I'm not getting enough. I'm not getting enough custody. I'm not getting enough money, and my home is not good enough. It's just the dynamic is simply what people just it's warped because of the timing. But you're right; it
Right.
should happen, and it allows me to make a point. If I had to do again, I would have changed the title of my book. By Take the High Road, Divorce with Compassion for Yourself and Your Family. Many people will take that and say, well, yeah, I'm not going to get that book because it sounds like all he's saying is compromise. No, that's not what I'm saying. In
Mm.
fact, it's kind of the opposite. Um, what I learned in speaking to the divorce attorneys is
Uh-huh.
that one of their biggest complaints is people come to them and they are not focused. Okay. So I want this, I want that, I want this. So I talked about this in the book where it's your responsibility to manage your attorney, not the other way around. And what you want to empower them with is you go to your attorney and you write down 2, no more than 3 goals that you have. When the divorce document is signed and stamped by a judge, what are the 2, no more than 3 things you want to achieve? Big picture. You give this and arm this to your attorney, and you tell him or her, compromise everywhere else. But these 2 or 3 things are important to me. So what
Okay.
Divorce with Compassion for Yourself and Your Family, Take the High Road means is that be focused. Let them have that silverware that you didn't care about in the first place. Okay.
Right.
You know what? She wants that house. Let her have the house. Go ahead and start in a new place. There's something healthy about having getting in a different environment. Okay. But what do you want to accomplish? What are your if you want 50% custody and you've been a good dad or a good mom, that's an example of a goal. All right. So when I say take the high road, divorce with compassion and yourself and your family, it's more about the importance of being focused. And
Mm.
if you are focused, you will typically save yourself tens of thousands of dollars because you are empowering your attorney to get the things that are important to you achieved and the things that are less important to compromise.
Yeah, that's great. I really like
Hmm.
that advice.
Great
Yeah,
advice.
stay
Yeah.
focused on the most important thing to you.
And to figure out what that is for yourself. And you might need a therapist to figure that out. You might need an outside source because you're in the middle of so much change and chaos and things shifting so quickly that you don't even know what's important to you. So get some support with that.
And that's a
Right.
really powerful point, Dr. Willow. And it could be possible that what's really important does change during your negotiations.
Absolutely.
But what is paramount is to make sure that list is not longer than 3 things, and it shouldn't be longer than 3 things. Okay? You go in there with 15 or 16 things that you
Right.
want. The only guarantee is this:
Right.
you're going to be your attorneys will love you.
Uh-huh.
Okay? And the other thing that you go to your attorneys and say, I'm going to be done in a month, or I'm finding a new attorney. These are the 2 things that are important to me. Get it done.
Wow.
I'm
I
done
like
in a
that.
month.
I like
And,
that.
and,
Yeah.
and then you're telling that attorney, I'm not going to be your 6-figure client. And most good attorneys
They'll be like,
who
great,
have
let's do it.
plenty of business, like
Yeah.
they want clients like that. The good attorneys don't want to take all
Drag
your
it
money.
out.
Yeah. The thing about
Yeah.
divorce that
It's a
really
pain in the ass for
Well,
everyone.
plus I think it's
yeah.
demoralizing for them. They see people just tear each other apart, and you do that
Yeah,
year
that
after
can't be
year after
nice to
year.
be around that
Yeah.
energy all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
And the other part about this, everybody, is unfortunately you can only control one attorney. And if your spouse does take an attorney who's not as uh, 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 honest and
Reasonable.
or
Yeah.
competent or reasonable, it could be a complicating factor. All right. But again, your responsibility is to manage your attorney, not the other way around.
So what about, okay, and this is the tricky one. I think this is the hardest one of all, is when you're so hurt and you're so angry and you just have an agenda to just screw them over. I mean, what do you do? Is there even a workable solution when someone is just, I want to
Oh,
stick
so
it
you're
to him
saying if
every
you're on the
chance I
receiving
get?
end of that, or if you're
Either
that
or,
person?
you
You
feel that
giver,
way,
yeah.
like, how do you shake free of that? And or B, you're the target of it.
Okay, if you are that person, then absolutely, positively, I'm going to just be as brutally direct and honest to you. You need to get in therapy because those types of feelings are understandable
Mhm.
if you're hurt, but they're unhealthy. It's going to cost you money
Yeah.
for sure.
And
And
time and energy.
it's going to
Health.
cost you time, energy, and health. And it's going to delay your ability to land on the other side of that fence.
It's gonna
Right.
hurt your kids even more too.
Correct. Correct. Now, if you're on the receiving end, all right, good news is in most states, there, this is something judges have seen before.
Yeah.
So you just need if you're on the receiving end of that, you go to your attorney and say, in a situation where my spouse is trying to hurt me. I want this done fast. I want to be protected. What's the best path to get this done? My guess is, again, only about 10% divorces end up litigated where you're in front of a judge. You'll probably be one of those 10%. So what you want to try to do is get in front of a judge as fast as possible. And also, if you're being attacked in this manner, then ask your attorney this question: what do I need to do so that if we are in front of a judge, I can walk away with the custody that I want, or to live in the situation that I want, and the support that I want? Because one of the things that's to keep in mind about divorce is your ex, he or she can ask for whatever they want. There's no crime, there's no legal parameters that restrict what somebody can ask for. But the good thing about divorce is pretty darn formulaic. Custody, support, uh, alimony, uh, custodial support, it's based on three primary factors: how long were you married, what you made when you were married, and how many kids you have. If it's longer than 10 years in most states, then it does factor into what the assets were coming into the marriage. But again, it's formulaic. Okay. So those numbers dictate a certain amount of support. And if your spouse is asking for a number far greater than that, then the faster you get in front of a judge who will look at these numbers and say, well, I get this. I understand you're asking for that, but based on what your spouse made, based on your kids, based on the length of your marriage, this is what our state dictates is reasonable, and
Okay.
they'll be directed. So, if you're dealing with a spouse who looks like he or she's out to hurt you and make your life difficult, uh, uh, um, then probably the faster you get in front of a judge, the better.
Well, I have just one final question, and maybe Dr. Willow does too, but mine would be, I really try to encourage and help couples and individuals who are looking for coupledom to consider that there is a world and a reality that exists where we can be happily ever after, even after divorce. And if we can really focus on friendship being like the number one highest form of relationship, then it's also possible that you can go in separate directions and say, thank you for everything you've represented in this chapter of our life. I set you free. And I want to be friendly. I want to be friendly because it's healthy for our hearts, and it's healthy if we've got kids, and for our friends who are all trying to share us. Any advice, final words around that concept?
Yes. Buy my book, please, because that is two very important chapters.
Okay.
What you just said, Leah, again, I wish I met you young ladies before I started writing this darn thing. Because you really get it. That is such an important point, is what is the ideal relationship to nurture with my former partner who we couldn't live with. So in this chapter of my book, we deal with the proper boundaries. Okay. Now, you're going to have to weigh in when new partners come involved. Oh boy, what
Right.
you think you might have tried to do changes. And if your new partner and your former spouse don't get along, so it's really healthy to have very specific boundaries. You're dealing with logistics. You're dealing with co-parenting. You're not having sex. Okay. That's an example of a boundary. Like, okay, let's say you're divorcing from somebody where you guys had a really vibrant, great sex life.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's got to stop.
Yeah.
That will keep you from moving on. And that's only going to cloud and confuse you, whether you think you can separate from that or not. So this chapter deals with these boundaries. And it's really important that you establish it. You want to be like you're running a business. He or she is your business partner, and the business is raising your kids happy, healthy, and well-adjusted, and get them out of the house. That's your job. That's the goal of the business. All right. And it's a business relationship. All right. You're not a shoulder to lean on. Doesn't mean you'd be mean, whatever, if the things are happening in his or her life. You've got to recognize that you are, and I would even say you're not friends. All right.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
You are business partners, and your business is raising the kids and get them out of the house. If you are friends, I guarantee you, when new partners come in,
Yeah, that gets a little sticky, doesn't it?
it's gonna affect your ability to have a new good relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can see where that goes sideways.
Yeah.
Dr. Willow,
I
anything
could-
you want to ask?
I was just going to say on that, like I could see so many people, especially in my world, being like, no, I can maintain a good friendship. I can do this. And yeah, it's just, it does affect new relationships sometimes when they come in, but not all the time. Okay, I guess my final question for you is like, what would you say to people now that you're on the other side of the fence? What would you say to people who are like, maybe they haven't even asked for a divorce yet. They're just sitting steaming in the like, oh my God, I got this long, arduous journey ahead of me to get to the other side of the fence.
All right. I'd say it again, get my book. One of the things that's different about my book than other divorce books is the very first chapter in the book is a look in the mirror chapter for those that have not begun the process.
Love that.
To try to assess where the relationship is. Is my relationship stale or is my relationship broken? Okay. A lot of divorces that you might think you're done, it's just stale. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It can be rekindled. And if you've got all this time invested, you want to, maybe you go and you see a therapist for 6-7 months before you determine you're going to go down that path. Now, statistically, these therapy sessions of damaged couples tends to salvage about 17% of marriages. Now, you might look at this and say, that's pretty depressing, but the relationships that actually go there are already quite damaged. I look at it as, goodness gracious, 1 in 5 are salvaged. Now, I'm going to give you another way to look at that is one thing that, and I talk about this in my book, is that one thing we tend to not think about is you're going to have conversations about your marriage, about your divorce with your children when they are adults. And your actions that you're taking now are going to be so important and reflected on and discussed and analyzed by your adult children. And think about this for a second. Let's say you're 99% certain, I'm done. What's the freaking rush? Go and see a therapist for 3, 4, or 5 months. If for no other reason than being able to say to your adult children who are 25 and 26, looking to start their own relationships and find their own partners, you know what? Your mom and I, it really wasn't healthy, but you guys were so important that before we decided to split, we invested in therapy. That is so powerful. What you're telling these kids is that our family unit was so important that we were just going to just throw it off. That there was absolute 100% clarity when we separated. So I'm a big believer, Dr. Willow and Leah, that even if you're 99% certain, and if you don't have another partner involved, affecting a third party, go see a therapist. If for no other reason than you are planting a seed and for the conversation that you will have with your children when they're adults, and that will be so well received by them, and it's going to give them a better chance to have a deep and meaningful relationship of their own, which is what you guys want.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well said.
Great advice. Andy Heller, we are fans. Thanks for being on our show.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. And
Thank
if your
you.
Okay,
relationship
so-
is in trouble, get Andy's book, y'all.
That's right.
Be
Get it.
prepared.
I want to
Be-
read it just for education.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Willow. So yeah, everybody, my book is on Amazon. Just Google Andy Heller, Take the High Road. It will pop up.
Great.
If I help you, put a review there. And like I said, I'll say it again. Look, I did not write this book to make money. I wrote this book as the labor of love because people helped me when I went through my own process. And if some of the stuff that I say today sounds like it's powerful and helpful, I tried to organize 46 different tips and nuggets in 46 chapters, just like this. So I hope my
so
book can help
valuable.
you.
So valuable.
Well, you can find the link to the book in the show notes as usual. And please tell us what you think about this episode. Like, where are you at in your own divorce journey? What got triggered or what was brought up for you today as you hear all these options? And certainly comment if you feel like you got some relief and some inspiration. And stay tuned. Dr. Willow and I are up with the dish. And see y'all soon. And thank you, Andy. We'll see you on the flip side.
Leah, Dr. Willow, thank you for having me as a guest. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Now, our favorite part, the dish.
Man, oh man, divorce is hard and painful, isn't it?
I, haven't had a lot of experience with divorce. My parents are still married, and I've never really even had a close friend go through a divorce that I've supported along the journey. So, so I felt like I didn't really have a lot to say. I've been certainly through a lot of big breakups myself and have helped a lot of people through those. So that's kind of but there's so many more logistics when it comes to divorce. There's so many more pieces that you have to unravel rather than just breaking up.
Yeah.
I think his advice on if you're the check writer, to be generous is really, really huge. And even if the other person can't appreciate it in the moment, hopefully someday they can. And whether they express their appreciation to you or not doesn't really matter. But that is taking the high road. And that's the name of his book, Taking the High Road. So I think that's the best thing you can do in any breakup situation is look for, zoom out, get a higher perspective about what's actually going on here for the other person. And do your best to stay in love. Ask yourself, what would love do?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think his perspective on think about your kids 10, 15, 20 years from now and the questions they're going to ask you and the example that you can hold just in case they have to, go through this. You'll have better advice for them if you can also take some good advice and do, maybe the hardest thing. But maybe the hardest thing is the right thing.
Mhm.
And, I think also it might be hard for a lot of people to see this as this isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. Ouch. Sometimes though, that can take you out of some suffering if you can ponder that at times that you may not want the divorce, you may still love your partner, but you can't know yet how great your life is going to be as a result of this relationship ending. I think in many ways that was my mom's experience.
Yeah. Well, I think most
she ended up
people
achieving, I think, a lot more, by the fact that she wasn't with my dad for these last chapters of her life. I think it ended up being better for her and it worked out that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't think it worked out that way for my dad.
I know. I was going to
Maybe
say
he
it
was
doesn't
surprised by
always.
that.
It's not always the best for it doesn't always turn out the best. But I think that's the mindset that you have to have going into it. So as quickly as you can shift into that mindset of okay, for whatever reason, this is happening, and it's going to be for my benefit in the end. And if you hold that vision and you hold that view rather than, fuck, this is happening, it's ruining my life, and I'm never going to get as good as I have, then you're going to, you really have the choice to steer yourself in either one of those directions
And
with your thoughts.
what's interesting is I do know a lot of people, personal friends, and maybe even some family members who were the ones to leave, who 20 years later wish they hadn't.
Okay, there you
And I've
go.
said,
Yeah.
like, sometimes I wish I would have just stuck through it. I was going through a phase and thought I needed something else. And maybe I did at the time, but where would I be if I had stayed? I might be in a better place today than I am,
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
have heard that side of the story. The
Yeah.
other thing that's interesting that's kind of fresh in my mind is that process of when I asked him, like, friendship, right? And he kind of came back with, friendship isn't always actually the right path forward. Oftentimes it's keep it a business relationship. And mainly it seemed like he was saying, because when a new partners come online,
Mhm.
there can be questions of loyalty. I mean, when I both look at what happened in my parents' relationship and also other friends, and being in a relationship with someone who had a very important ex-wife who very much was active and continued to be very active, continued to be a best friend. There were some hierarchical, I'm not gonna, how you say that better for me?
Hierarchical.
Yeah, thank you. Positions, right? Now
Yeah.
I knew better to just respect that, to go, she can be the queen. I'm not threatened by this at all. And so therefore she didn't have to be threatened by me. So
Yeah.
we weren't positioning, mainly because I just respected what a big person she was in his
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And
And you knew
that
her too.
respect ended up coming back and it was
Yeah.
all good. Now,
It
not
worked out.
everyone can do that.
Yeah.
And when there's kids involved, I've seen so many new partners who are irritated by the ex, who thinks it's strange that you're still trying to be friends, who really questions the loyalty. So a lot of people don't have that capacity. But sometimes my Pollyanna part of me just wants to go, well, you know
Let's
what?
all just love
Why
each
don't you
other.
think about
I
that?
know. I know. I'm of that mindset too. I'm friends,
Yeah.
not all my exes, but some of them, and we have a great relationship. And I have seen new people come in and not been able to handle our friendship and relationship.
Yeah.
And so that does happen. But then I just feel like, well, then that's not the right person. If somebody new is coming in and you have a good relationship with your ex who you co-parent with and had a whole life with, and
Yeah.
that
Why
new
don't you
person comes
celebrate
in and
that?
can't handle
Yeah.
it, in my opinion, then
Yeah.
they're
Like
not the
that's
right
reason
next
for high
person.
regard. Yeah. Like, wow,
Yeah.
you really managed something that could have been really hard. And you
Yeah,
did that for your
exactly.
kids and you're choosing to see the best in your ex
One of
versus
the things we
focusing.
didn't talk about was regret.
Mm,
And I think that there's so much that's such a big part of the grieving process and loss process is grief is really this bigger umbrella emotion that's filled with all kinds of things like anger, frustration, regret, sadness. And so I think one of the things that I have learned just through my own breakups is nothing, you cannot miss what is yours to have. Whatever it is that is for you will find you. And so if you
mm.
can keep that perspective, then the regret doesn't have a lot of room to breathe. So
Well said. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing, a perspective to take to heart for sure. One thing I'm really grateful to my mom, but I think was hard for her future partners, was my mom always invited my dad to Christmas morning and to birthday parties.
uh-huh.
And I have to say, it was really nice having my dad there. It
Uh-huh.
really felt like it completed something. Yes, it was at times awkward, but that was showed so much graciousness on my mom's part, and my
Yeah.
dad was really grateful.
Yeah, I'm
Like
sure.
he really he demonstrated that gratefulness. He got out of there when it felt appropriate. At some
Yeah.
point that stopped because a new husband thought it was too weird. And we
Uh-huh.
all adjusted.
Yeah.
But I have to say, thanks, Mom. I really am grateful to my parents, even though I was seeing the things and all the pain and all the devastation and all the confusion and all that stuff that was just part of the journey. They really did try to put us first, and I think they did a pretty decent job. So
Mm,
there can be, there can be love even after love changes.
that's right.
Yeah.
Love lasts a lifetime,
That's
keeps going on
right.
and on. It just changes form.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, y'all. Let us know if you want more divorce experts with more perspectives. We're happy to seek them out. And if you've got a guest suggestion, let us know. Love, love, love.
Thanks for tuning in. This episode was hosted by Tantric Sex Master Coach and Positive Psychology Facilitator Leah Piper, as well as by Chinese and Functional Medicine Doctor and Taoist Sexology Teacher Dr. Willow Brown. Don't forget, your comments, likes, subscribes, and suggestions matter. Let's realize this new world together.